Welcome back to YouTube University. Tim and Nancy Danter. So happy to have you back. Today we're going to talk about an inflation hedge asset and why it's important to understand what's happening with inflation at this moment in time. So if we were to put a date on today, it's February 13th. I think Valentine's Day is tomorrow. Did you get me something? After 30 years, you know I don't care about Valentine's Day. I just want to hang out with you. Anyways, inflation and why inflation is such an important thing for you to understand, and why, because we've been talking about assets versus liabilities, profits versus loss. In the last video, we talked about having income producing assets. Now what we need to talk about is the ultimate, an income producing asset that is also in a hedge, an asset that's an inflation hedge. So this came from a comment that we received on one of the previous videos to understand what an inflation hedge asset was. So thank you so much for asking us. We really appreciate this. Helps us direct what to do the content on. So when you think of inflation hedge, what's happening right now with everything that happened with the pandemic, the governments around the world did what is called quantitative easing. They printed a ton of money to put liquidity, to put cash into the system so that they could try to stave off a bad economic downturn to the point of almost being a depression. And so I bet historians will look back at this and suggest that there might have been another alternative. But if I was in government and I was leading government, chances are probably may have gone down the same path. We just watched an interview with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who was saying that he was never, ever a fan of quantitative easing, of printing money. And the reason why he would say that, and the reason that it's such a big concern, is because as the currency is being printed like Anothony Pompliano would say, they're just printing money, is that it devalues that money. So much so that the buying power of the dollar is being eroded. So when we think back on, Tim was telling me that Tim's parents passed away when he was a young guy, and he inherited his mom and dad's house. So when he was a young guy, so 30 years ago, when we inherited the house, he had told me that his parents had bought the house for $42,000.
$27,500.
$27,500. And then how long would they have had the house by the time we inherited it?
Well,
you were 25. Did they buy it when you were a baby?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, so they had it for 25 years, and then
25 years it appreciated up to what we sold it at, which was.
And we sold it after being married about 10 years, I think, 10 or 15. We lived in that house. Anyways, when we sold it for $460,000 or $475,000.
$429, honey.
When you correct me, it makes me look like I don't know what I'm talking about.
You know exactly what you're talking about.
I can't remember the numbers.
Listen. We don't have to go back to this. Remember this from another video? Oh, take it away, Nance.
Now I've lost my train of thought. Anyways, the whole point of this example has to do specifically with way back when the dollar could buy more things. That house, the house did not change in all those years. It was the same structure, maybe a coat of paint, maybe a new deck here and there, but it was the same house sitting on the same street. Why were they able to buy it for $27,000? And now somebody, if you wanted to buy that same house today in downtown Oakville, you would be paying close to $1.6 million.
No, that house is, yeah. Oh yeah, like, $1.6 million. $1.6 million. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. But that is inflation. That's what happens when inflation happens. So inflation affects assets. So again, when we go back to that first video that we did on YouTube University with the asset versus liability, and you want to have assets on your personal balance sheet, because as we see inflation happening, your assets raise. So you want to get into owning assets so that you can take advantage of this inflation. Having said that, cash is considered an asset. Having a position in cash considered an asset. But when inflation happens, your cash starts to devalue. As that example, we can go to an even smaller example. Groceries. When was the last time, when I went to the grocery store and we were early married on, I think my grocery budget was $100 a week or something for the entire week. $100. That was what we had budgeted when we were young and just starting out.
Single, no kids.
Right. Okay. I can barely go to the grocery store now and not buy $100, and it's just him and I, and that will last us less than a week. So you get a bag instead of 5 bags for $100, and we can see that happening over and over and over. That's inflation. So if you were just holding cash and nothing else, your buying power with that cash goes down. So when we said we got excited about cryptocurrency, the reason we got excited about it was because it's protecting us from inflation. An example of this is when we look at Venezuela. There's a few countries like Lebanon and Venezuela. There's a few examples of countries over the years, but Venezuela comes to mind because I have a friend from Venezuela. They have printed so much money in that country. It's devalued the currency so badly that they can take a wheelbarrow full of currency with them to go and buy bread. It's insane. And this is why Prime Minister Stephen Harper, in the interview that we watched this morning, and we'll put a link to that interview if you care to watch it down below, why he was so worried about ever printing too much money, because your country wants to hold the value of its currency. So this is where Bitcoin starts to come into things. And in a few minutes, I'm going to share a video clip from Anothony Pompliano, who was the one that convinced me that this Bitcoin was the way to go, that this is the way of the future. We're going to try to put a little video clip in here of Anothony Pompliano explaining this whole concept of Bitcoin being an inflation hedge asset.
So why is this system important? Today, we have two financial systems. We have the legacy finance system that relies on a fiat currency, the US dollar, as the core unit of account. And that core unit of account has a monetary policy that is inflationary in nature, meaning that they constantly produce more of it and it devalues over time. Since the early 1900s, the US dollar has lost 95+% of its purchasing power, right? So what $1 could buy 100 years ago is much, much more than what $1 could buy today. So you need many more dollars to buy the same amount of goods or services that you needed 100 years ago. That's because it's inflationary in nature. Bitcoin is 180-degree opposite. So the second financial system, or the alternative financial system, or what people call the Bitcoin system or the digital finance system, is all based on a deflationary asset. And all, again, big fancy finance word, all that means is there's a capped amount. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. About 18.4 million Bitcoin have already been put into circulation through that Bitcoin reward that we talked about, that mechanism. And so there's still just about 2.5 million Bitcoin that are going to be distributed over the coming years and decades. And so in a deflationary system, what that means is that the asset, the core unit of account, a Bitcoin or a fraction of a Bitcoin, will continue to increase in value rather than decrease, because supply and demand economics tell us if you have a fixed supply of an asset and demand increases, then the only thing that can happen is you could either try to produce more of the asset or the price has to go up. Because Bitcoin can't be recreated, no one's producing more Bitcoin, that means that the price continues to rise. Bitcoin has grown in US dollar terms at a compound annual growth rate of over 30% for many, many years now. And so the deflationary nature or structure and design of Bitcoin is 180 degrees difference. It's the complete opposite of the inflationary fiat system that we all had grown up using.
Once you understand this, once you really understand this, then you almost it almost makes you go cold inside, because then you realize, oh my gosh, my life savings. We've been married 30 years. We've got some money in the bank. We've been saving. What if it is not worth anything because of this pandemic and because of all the money printing going on? The value of the currency goes down and the buying power of the future is diminished. And that defeats the whole purpose of everything we've been doing. So watch Anthony, and then, you know what? Hopefully you'll see and understand the excitement of what we've got going. So in conclusion, in our next video, we're going to start talking a little bit about how to buy cryptocurrency in Canada. So if you've got the understanding of the reasons why to buy crypto, now we got to get into a little bit more about the how to do it as a Canadian. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in and indulging us on our rants here, our dant rants, and being a part of the YouTube University Learning. We really appreciate it. And if you've got any comments or you want to see something in particular, we're by no means experts, but we have been learning little by little, and so we might have something to share. Have a great day.